Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to another episode of Friends of the Squared Circle, where I'm your host, Crander Q, aka my real name. Now, before we get started, I just want to show off some of the merch we have here. I just brought the hat today. You know about the stickers, you know about the t-shirts. You can hit me up on social media to find that, as well as our Tumblr sponsor, Superior Creations. You can find them on facebook.com/Superior Creations MN to get all your custom tumbler needs, as well as our other sponsor here. We have Darren Corbin. Yes, use.
Wait.
Oh.
Just want to make sure. It's a lovely tumbler. I absolutely get that. But let me stop you right there. If anybody is going to plug me, it's going to be me. And that's how we're going to do it. My name is obviously Darren Corbin. I am the loudmouth mercenary, which is why I absolutely love to do these type of deals, because it allows me to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is me. So with that said, we'll talk more about joining my Patreon, which you know how great it is and how
I love the Patreon. Yep.
Yes, and we'll talk about where to get some of the merch for myself as well. But yes, I mean, it's great. You have a Tumblr sponsor, which is amazing, which is awesome. They do great work. I love it. But don't forget, we are here for me today. So
we are, yes, sir.
Just an FYI.
All right. As you can see, Darren Corbin is in the house. This is probably going to be one of my favorite interviews. No offense to anybody else. Darren Corbin obviously knows that I am a diehard Corbin fan. No one comes close. So, Darren, how are you doing tonight?
I'm all right. It's been dreary for the past couple of days. So, I feel like as soon as we flip those clocks back, I just get used to being dark and ready for winter. So it's like, I just wish I could kind of hibernate a little bit on it. But it's not been a bad night so far.
This is my favorite time of the season because I know that, I'm going to be slowing down with the traveling, going to the wrestling shows. I used to work retail, so I get landlocked here to do all the holidays. And that way I know it just helps me save money so that I can be on the road come the spring to obviously go to a Darren Corbin match, because anything that Darren Corbin puts out, I like to be there. So,
hey, I can sympathize a little bit for you, because I used to work retail like right when I was first wrestling. And man, for a long time, it took me to be able to listen to Christmas music again, because I was in a mall, man. And that was brutal. That was absolutely brutal. Probably why I'm why everyone always thinks I'm the bad guy I am now, because I had to deal with all those people out there for holiday shopping. So yeah, retail's a whole nother monster.
Definitely. So since we're here, everybody knows why we're here. We're here to talk to Darren Corbin about what got you into wrestling. Now, if you're here for Darren's wrestling career, we're going to not really talk about that too much, because there's other podcasts out there. I'm sure he's done this type of interview 1,000 times. I'm trying to be different. We want to know Darren Corbin, the fan. Like, what got you into professional wrestling as a fan?
I think it was, so like I've always said, like the main thing is when we moved into this house when I was 4, we had a TV that only picked up 4 channels, and one of the shows, or that day, one of the things that we were able to watch was WWF's main event, Saturday Night Main Event. And I think I just got hooked really early, just because of like the characters really got me. Like I was a huge like Randy Savage fan when I started. I loved like the Ultimate Warrior. And like the biggest thing that really when I started watching more and more and more, I began to find out that my grandma was actually a fan, but she didn't really embrace it, because my grandpa didn't really care for it. I think it was because his dad was a diehard AWA fan. So like when AWA was on, like everything stopped. Like they were the ones that gathered around the TV. There was nothing. You don't bother anybody. You just sit and you watch wrestling. So I think my grandpa kind of backed off from that a little bit. I'm pretty positive. But my grandma liked it. And so when I started to get into it, we used to watch it together, which was awesome. And I had a lot of fun doing it. Like we watched WCW together. I had like my favorites, WWF. And then she did pass away when I was 7, but I continued to like wrestling. And then when I met my like stepbrothers, we all liked wrestling. And then we got into ECW, and that was like like awakening of wrestling. So I've been a fan. Wrestling's been a part of my life, either as a fan or almost half my entire life. I've
Mhm.
been a wrestler. So it's very interesting to see how intertwined it's been throughout my for as long as I can remember, I
Gotcha.
guess.
Gotcha. So now we're going to go back to that WWF stage. You mentioned Randy Savage and Ultimate Warrior. Now, what was it about those characters that stood out for you?
Well, color scheme was a big thing,
Okay.
like colorful, like obviously. I mean, that translates well to me now. But Savage was there was something about like characters and whatever it was, but like I was 100% convinced that Randy Savage was insane. Like, like
I
that's how
agree.
he
Yes,
was.
definitely. Yep.
So like it was a big thing with that. And it is kind of funny because like watching those times, like Ultimate Warrior was one where just the paint and like the
Mhm.
tassels and like just constantly like go go go. It was insane. But I remember I dressed up as like Big Boss Man for Halloween one
Okay.
year. When I got into WCW, it's always kind of funny what the three that I pick, because Sting was always one of my favorites. I was always a Sting fan.
Mhm.
I loved Brian Pillman. He was always one of my like top 5 favorites of all time. Uh, I started liking Brian Pillman the face, and then I think when he became in the Hollywood Blondes and into the Horsemen, I really want to say it was like the first time that I actually like kind of got behind like a bad guy in wrestling, or like,
Okay.
and I dug it. But my third favorite from WCW was actually the Z-Man, Tom Zink.
Okay.
And everybody's always like, that's an interesting 3. And I'm like, I just really liked those. I mean, like Sting was that. I mean, Sting kind of has that larger than life deal, but
Mhm.
Pillman was like an athlete, a high flyer. Z-Man was just like like everything, like a good looking baby face. It was so typical, but I loved it. And I remember, I think one of my earliest memories of a WCW show, and I want to say it was Saturday night, but I don't remember what brought me to WCW. But I remember watching Z-Man versus Terry Taylor on a
Okay.
WCW Saturday night, and like I got so into it that I remember I was jumping up and down on like an ottoman, and I tipped over backwards off the ottoman. And I guess that was just the thing where I was like, oh man, like I bet my mom at that point was like trying to talk me into being like, just so you know, you don't have to get so into it, like, because
Mhm.
like if my favorites lost or whatever, she'd be like, don't worry, they'll win, like don't tip over and break your neck on the ottoman. But ever since then too, like a lot of the people that always stood out to me were like very larger than life characters.
Okay.
And I think even still to this day, I'm not really a big like, as far as what matches stand out to me, like my favorite matches or memories aren't probably the same ones that you'd be like, oh, this Dave Meltzer match. No, there were certain things like where there was an emotional moment in that match, or like a huge moment where it was like so defining, so career turning, like a big baby face underdog fight.
Mhm.
I can still remember those. And it's, I think that's also stuck with me for so long, just because I grew up with some of those interesting moments of the early 90s, like Savage getting bit by
Mm.
the
Yep.
snake, Taker putting Ultimate Warrior inside a coffin and shutting it. Like I remember trying to tell people like what happened and being like, you won't believe it, and like having no concept of time as a kid and being like, he
Yep.
put him in a airtight casket for like 3 hours. And it's like, what? That's not a thing. It's like, are you sure it's not 3 seconds? No, it's 3 minutes,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So, but like still, and I guess that's just proof that in my mind, those things still stand out to me, and I can recap them like that even now.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, the backstory behind like Jake the Snake and Macho Man doing that, like, he was so afraid of that snake, and then Jake's like, "Just take the spot, brother." Like, and he had to like do it himself in order to like prove to Macho that it wasn't gonna hurt that bad, and yada yada yada. Back to like favorite matches, like I have one that stands out, and people have no idea who I'm talking about. But it was like Kiwi versus James Jett or Jet something, not Joey Avalon, excuse me. James Jett or something. I remember sending you a clip of it
Easy
where
Money, right? Jason Jett? Was it Jason Jett?
probably
Easy
Jason Jett, yep.
Yeah.
Because Kiwi's hair was like Hulk Hogan's, but it was spiked up. And then the other guy had these funny pants on, but they just put on a clinic on the WCW, their final pay-per-view, that Creed one. And that's one that I always show people. They're like, how do you like this? I'm like, I don't know. There's something about this match that just is just fun to watch for me. So you mentioned WCW, you mentioned Sting. Now, I always bring this up when people say that they love WCW. What are your thoughts on Disco Inferno? I am a Disco Inferno fan, and it seems like everybody else is. What's your take on Disco?
Oh, do you mean like when I was growing up watching it, or like Disco now, or like
all together? You can just pack it all together there.
So so like right now, the biggest thing is like he clearly just kind of, to me, he's just the guy on Twitter that's trying to get attention.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you open yourself up for this, like, it's this silly cycle where it's like, you say something and people respond and they dunk on you, and then you say it's like for traffic or whatever. But like a lot of times, like a lot of the takes that I see, I like look into and I'm like, I don't even have time to like wait. Like, I don't have time to weigh in on this one way or another. Like, he'll say something and be like, that bothers you? Like,
yeah,
God, I got so many other things that I'm thinking about. Even wrestling, like, there's so many other things. The deal with Disco Inferno, when I was watching WCW and starting off, he was always just like a guy that was there. And I always do remember like him coming out and being like, I don't think I ever hated his matches. I don't think I can't think of a one that's like, the only match that I can really think of to me that stands out was like him and Perry Saturn, but that's because I like really liked ECW, so I thought it was cool when Saturn won the TV title. But I was actually a bigger fan of Alex Wright. Like I'm a huge like Alex Wright fan. So I know that they had a short-lived like the Dancing Fools partnership, but like I just really liked Alex Wright. And I think the other thing too, I didn't really grow up knowing much about like disco music or the 70s. So it's like really weird when you're watching going, this guy's like really into this thing I don't know. And it's like his whole life. So I never could get behind it. And here's the ultimate kind of goal where you're like, it's a funny layer of whether you like somebody or not. I think of when I played NWO versus WCW Revenge. And like you kind of like sometimes you have your favorite guys, like people that you're like, oh yeah, I was a huge Ray fan, or like I loved Eddie. So of course you play as them. But then you always had somebody who was like on the game who you were like, I'm gonna play as this dude because like his moveset's awesome on here. Again, if I think of that, I never picked him to play as, but I pick Alex Wright. And like my favorite thing to do with Alex Wright was like do something and then do the freaking like the dance all the time that he did. So I think I'm not like the best because I'm not like one way or another on him. I just like he was there. And I'm kind of like whatever people consider a hot take out of him. I'm just like, I don't feel enough to like jump in on it. And by the time I see anything he posts, everybody is on top of it. So I'm just like, okay. But I also forget like how many championships he held too. Like
he was always on there. Like and I think he was part of like one of the, I'm just gonna spitball it, 20 NWO reincarnations that they had. I remember he came out with like an NWO shirt and like, what are you doing? Like, why are we keep going through this NWO. They just kept running that through the mud, so.
Yeah, I guess with that, I was watching I kind of took a break a little bit, but I was watching all the WCW shows in order, and then I forgot that he was in the trying to impress the NWO, and then I also forgot that he has this stint coming up here with the Filthy Animals too.
Oh, okay.
I almost forgot about that. By then I was done watching, so now recapping is all really new, the era that I'm in, that I took off on.
Another guy that always stood out during that time period, he was always the opening match on the pay-per-views that I liked, was Ernest the Cat Miller. And I'm just I don't know why. I just always thought that he put on great matches. And then back to Brian Pillman, there is one match that I remember that I really liked, was him and Mark Merrow. They had an opening match, and I just watched the pay-per-view again. I think it was a Halloween Havoc or something, and they just tore the house down. That's a match that definitely stands out in the back of my mind. So now, did you prefer more of the WWF Macho Man or the WCW Macho Man?
Oh, see, it's almost like two different people for me. Okay, so obviously I was a big Macho fan. I mentioned that. I was the other thing that was kind of interesting though is kind of right when I was getting into was, I feel like that wave that was building him up into his retirement and then ultimate comeback. So I don't think I got to see it wasn't as fresh in my mind, the WrestleMania 3 matchup, Savage and Steamboat.
Yeah,
I kind of came in after that.
Okay.
But Savage and Warrior, that leads the charge for emotion, Miss Elizabeth coming back and going into it as losing your career, going into it as a heel and then turning completely around to, marry Elizabeth, which was awesome. But when he went to WCW, and the one thing, because I'm such a Savage fan, the short title reigns that always seem to go back to Hogan always never set right with me. I thought Savage was super entertaining, but that feud with Diamond Dallas Page is awesome. The matches are so good. That level of Savage is great. I was such a fan. I was a big fan of the Macho Madness stuff. And he's so unhinged. It was believable, which was great. So they're almost two totally different people, but the WWF version is, I'm used to the babyface Savage. And I would say that a lot of the moments that I remember from him are definitely more the wedding, getting bit by the snake, trying to pin Yokozuna in the Royal Rumble to get eliminated for some reason. But, beating, winning the championship again, stuff like that. But when I think of him in WCW, I think of obviously his NWO phase and him teasing the thing with Sting and all that stuff. And almost he reinvented himself, which I think is awesome, especially when you are brought in based on who you are. And it seemed like he was still very much the Slim Jim, the red and yellow, all that stuff. But to break into the NWO, I know that the NWO was the Wolfpack was always going to be more about Nash and whatnot, but I would have loved to see Savage have gotten a big score a big victory over Hogan as who is the true leader of things at that time. That would have been big. I was waiting for more of an implosion with the two of them to get that match that we want, but it's interesting, all things considered.
Yeah, I always remembered a lot of Flair and Savage during the WCW time too. That's where I just grew to start hating Flair as a kid before I realized everything that it was. But back to the Slim Jims, that's, like you said, reinventing himself. They put a lot into that. And I mean, it's they're still advertising it to this day, and it's a little bit nostalgia just going and be like, man, I used to eat those things and they're just god awful. I know I'll never get a Slim Jim sponsorship, so I'm going to say it. It's just, the way they put the advertising behind him and just, he sold it so well. It's just iconic. It's something from the 90s that people remember as snapping to a Slim Jim, it's just iconic. So
whenever I walk past him in like a grocery store or
Mhm.
like gas station, like I think of him all the
Mm,
time. Like I think of
yep.
the commercials. Like you're right. It's very synonymous, like 100%.
I also loved him in Ready to Rumble and that convenience store little thing that he did there, and yeah, definitely loved Macho growing up as well. I wasn't one of the guys that always liked the big names. I always tried to find someone else because I didn't want to go with the crowd. That's why I like guys like Glacier, Disco. Before Ray and Eddie got super big, like I was really big on them, and the Benoit, DDP, and such, because they weren't the huge stars, like the Austins, the Rocks, the Takers, Hogan's, Nash, and that. I was more just the second tier of WCW, WWF as my favorite. So,
I can relate to that too because like the guys that I liked, I always thought were like, for example, the Intercontinental or the
mhm,
U.S. title guys. Those
yep,
were the matches I thought were interesting. I loved like the guys that would always fight for those, because like everyone's always like it's a workhorse championship.
yep,
While I agree, I think the biggest thing is I just loved how there was always a pool of guys that were going for it,
yep,
and uh, I was actually like a really big like Eddie fan early. Like I thought he was really good.
mhm,
When he came into WCW, and I think it just was like again a perfect storm. I had learned of ECW. He had turned heel, and then I learned that he was in ECW, and I was like, oh man. And so like I went down a weird rabbit hole before the
mhm,
internet happened, and like there was so much stuff. And when he did the like LWO,
mhm,
one of the funny thing is for me is I grew up in Detroit Lakes, and wrestling was so popular at that time that we had the Laker World Order, so the LWO.
oh,
And I
nice,
remember getting like upset because first of all, I liked wrestling forever, and people made
mhm,
fun of me for liking wrestling. And even when it like died out a little bit, then suddenly all the Fairweather friends like kind of didn't want to watch wrestling anymore. But the hilarious part about it was like they did the LWO, and I was like, the LWO is like Eddie's thing, like it's the
mhm,
like Lucha World Order, and like so in my mind, I was always an Eddie fan, and then
mhm,
I was so happy when he truly got to shine in
yep.
WWE. That was awesome.
Yeah, I definitely loved a lot of the cruiserweights. I mentioned that on the previous podcast, like Chris Jericho, Benoit, Dean Malenko. And
Were
then
you
there's
a
just a lot.
Blitzkrieg fan?
What's that?
Were you a Blitzkrieg fan?
I vaguely remember him, like he had
Oh,
like the bandana, the silver, and
I fight to this day to be like, man, Blitzkrieg deserved a cruiserweight title reign. Like, I thought it was so awesome. Like the stuff that I've been like when I've left off, it's I left off in November of 1999 watching all the Nitros Thunders and pay-per-views in order. But like those early, like the April and May of 99 were like Blitzkrieg's pretty focused. Some
mhm,
of the stuff he's doing is like absolutely insane. I think it's Spring Stampede that match that he has is like so good. Like his
gotcha.
cruiserweight match, I was like, why did they not put the belt on this guy? Like this is amazing.
That's another belt that just changed hands like so many times, and like it felt like it just who's got it this week? Oh, that guy. And the one that I always liked, I don't know why I liked him, but it was like Prince Ikea or
IKEA.
Cola. Yeah, and I don't know what it was. I just thought he looked cool, and he was probably one of the first Samoan wrestlers, maybe if he was Samoan even, that I like was like, oh, this guy's cool, but I don't know. It was just something about that guy as well. So a
I
weird
love
taste. So
speaking of him, I loved the TV title because here's what I thought was cool. Like the TV title was made to be defended on TV. I
hmm
liked the 10-minute time limit, but it was you constantly had to work like you were always on. So it
hmm
wasn't like the better man beat you. Sometimes you would just be worn down from defending it all the time.
yep.
And obviously Iakea's first title reign was an upset win over Regal, where he got the
Oh,
TV
okay.
championship. And like the thing that I thought was so cool is like he was on borrowed time defending the championship, and then they were doing this thing with like Regal and Ray to see who would probably get it next.
hmm
And Ultimo Dragon slides right in and like gets the TV title, but it's believable that like he would have beat Iaukea. But like that's the thing, I loved the TV title concept is one of my favorites. I absolutely love it.
Gotcha. Another name just dropped there, Ultimate Warrior, or not Ultimate Warrior, Ultimo Dragon. That was another guy that I just absolutely loved, and it was a pleasure to meet him at Fortune Bania when we were up there. And the inside child in me was screaming with excitement when I was with my godson Harley, who is almost as big as me height wise, and he looks like he's a 20-year-old, but I remember Sonny Ono was like, you should come train and be a wrestler with me. You're only 12. So, I was just like, oh my gosh. I guarantee that kid's going to be like 6'3", 250 stacked. So hopefully he gets into the wrestling business and I can help him, but so I don't know if his dad would really care for that because, the hard push to get him to go to anything nowadays, but.
That's fair. Yeah.
All right. But swinging back in it, you mentioned ECW. Let's just kind of go into that, and then we can kind of get into your teen years to see kind of if you fell out of love with it. But ECW, anybody that, besides the ones that you named that you really gravitated towards?
Sabu.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So like the thing was like when I first started watching, it's hilarious actually. Like, I believe my first introduction to ECW was the 1997 PWI 500.
Okay.
Raven was ranked. And I remember looking at it, and I remember looking at Raven and going, this guy looks really familiar. And I was reading an article and I was reading about him, and I remember him from WCW. I remember Scotty Flamingo. And then I read more about the stuff he was doing in ECW, and I was like, what the hell are they doing at ECW? And I'm trying to think of who else. There's a couple guys that were there that I was like, wait, they're there? Like it was like a few former WCW or Fed guys, or maybe it was because it wasn't, I didn't know about Austin coming through until later, but I knew about Pillman being there. But I felt like I had to check it out. And it was like the guys that I knew that were getting shots there were like, it was interesting. Like without knowing ECW and then jumping into it, like for example, seeing the Body Donnas and then being like, Chris Candido was this guy at like Shane Douglas, who was Dean Douglas, is like the biggest, like, and then seeing how it all would intertwine. And then I started just seeing like all the crazy like hardcore stuff. And I don't remember where we kind of started to like catch wind of it. I do remember it was right around one of the Heatwave pay-per-views, and we got our hands on a tape. Gosh, all this is making me seem so old, but got our hands on a tape of like a preview of like ECW TV and a recap of Heatwave. And we were just like, this is amazing. And I put this over all the time. There was a kiosk in the Mall of America that sold RF videotapes, ECW tapes, cams, all that stuff. We bought every single thing we could find. We were huge ECW fans. And then when they started doing pay-per-view, we were like, when we heard about them, because I'm trying to think, it was slightly right around Barely Legal, like right around the time they're having their first pay-per-view. And then we were like, we need to find out how to get these pay-per-views. And when we finally started watching, we like got every single pay-per-view, every single thing. But I was a huge like Sabu fan. The guys that I really liked, and it was always a testament to ECW was like the last time I remember watching wrestling and being upset, like genuinely upset when my favorites lost. And so like when they would build up like heels and all that stuff, and like, well, I would get mad when Sabu lost, like when Justin Credible was beating everybody. Like I was like, come on, like all that. But again, like I got really big into right when RVD and Jerry Lynn were doing their stuff, and when Taz was having his massive like his reign and everything, and just catching up on old stuff and then realizing the rivalry that Taz and Sabu had.
Mhm.
And while I didn't get to see it right away, somebody was like, it was like a year that they built this up. And I was like, they don't do that anywhere else. And I do remember
No.
seeing just a clip of that match, and the crowd is going insane. And I'm like, God, I wish they did this more. I wish I could see this.
Mhm.
So the thing what I liked about ECW is I kind of knew right away that they kind of played to strengths, and they really tried to find like differences or at least a unique attribute of somebody. Like I was a huge Steve Corino fan. I thought
Okay.
that was great in ECW. I loved it. Loved Tajiri, stuff like that.
Oh, I love Tajiri.
Watching Tanaka and Mike Awesome beat the crap out of each other. So and then there was things that I was like, these wrestlers, like sometimes I'd see guys and I was like, they're not really for me. But I would see them like beat my favorites and be like, I see what they're doing. I'm supposed to hate you. Like that was my mindset. But I just loved everything that they did. And like I feel like they really did a good job like emphasizing, and I never had seen pay-per-views done the way that they did them, where like a match could get totally thrown off on the fly, something could happen, start turning into a triple threat. Like stuff like that was crazy to me, but it was different and unique, and that's why I loved it. And I totally understand growing up with it why people feel that it left a void. I 100% like, because when they were gone, it was kind of like I could always count on you guys for an alternative to like WCW was, the wheels were falling off.
Definitely.
WWF was trying to come out and find an identity out of the Attitude Era, and I was like, I can always count on you guys for this. But yeah, I felt like I was such a diehard fan that I was bummed when it shut down. There was so much I was like, I wish I wanted everybody to go get another job. I was like, it was like when a band makes it big, like when you see them show up on TV and you're like, which is hilarious because when ECW like invaded Raw in '96 or whatever, I wasn't really watching WWF at that time. So like I didn't even know that they had come through. So when people are like, well, how did you not hear about them sooner? Like they were on TV. And I was like, I wasn't watching. I didn't get back into WWF until later. So I completely missed that. So I actually had just gone back and like watched the stuff where I think it's Jeff Hardy versus Sabu, where Sabu jumps off the R out of the entranceway or whatever it is.
Okay.
And it's just like, wow, I had no idea that this was a thing. Just crazy.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned Jerry Lynn, and any love for Jerry Lynn and Tommy Dreamer? If you know, you know.
All the love for those two. Both of those guys, Tommy and Jerry, have been amazing for me. I sing the praises of Jerry Lynn all the time, not just for me, but as somebody where I've been like, he was an angel sent from heaven to make wrestling better. Like he's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He's always been such always an ear to he'll always listen. He always is there for advice. He always wants to help. And I think he is one of the smartest guys. And like the fact that he is a agent at AEW, I think is one of the biggest benefits that they could ever have. But the matches that I've had with Jerry, I've only had two. And the two matches that I have had with Jerry, I've learned so much and things that I still do to this day. One of them was a match that was 2.5 years in, and I still use stuff that I learned from him now.
Very nice.
And then obviously Tommy Dreamer. The one thing about Dreamer that I'll always appreciate is my match with Tommy. My first one with him is one of my absolute favorites because it was like a perfect storm that came together. And it was at Heavy On. It was at Jerry Lynn's retirement show.
Yep.
And, there was so many names on there, and they didn't have a lot of local guys, I guess, going, like picking up big victories. Most of the guys were going under to all the names, I guess would be the best way. Like all the, so they were kind of trying to think of a way. And originally I guess the pitch was a DQ. They wanted, like me to win, but then get beat up or something. I don't know what it was. I can't remember. But Tommy was like, isn't he like one of your guys? And they were like, yeah. Isn't he like, you're trying to build him up? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, well, I'll put him over. He's like, this is what we'll do. He's like, it will be a no DQ. I'll put him over. I'm not coming back. He is.
Yep.
And he just got it. He just gets it. And like that match with Tommy, I felt like I was on for that. But also just Tommy being Tommy, I felt like it just clicked. And it was one of my favorite matches I ever had. And I think that match and the win even, it was hilarious because in Minnesota, not a lot of people were like really using me or paying attention, but all of a sudden, like a mindset kind of changed after that.
Mm-hmm.
Like suddenly people wanted to use me on shows. And I always took it as kind of a backwards compliment, like a backhanded compliment when people like, man, your match with Tommy Dreamer was really good. You really held your own against Tommy. And I was like, did you ever once think that match was good because I'm good? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like so, and again, Tommy instilled that confidence in me, which I really appreciate. So those two I will always sing the praises of, Tommy, Jerry Lynn and Tommy both.
Yeah. And then the people that were at Saturday Night Nitro know what I'm hinting at
Yeah.
with your little issues with Jerry Lynn. Definitely was great to see that. Yeah, and I was there for the Tommy Dreamer match. I remember I had met you in North Dakota, like I think a year or two prior to that, and I had been a fan ever since. The things that I brought to you that you haven't seen in forever was those DVDs. And,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. I wish I could get those bad boys to work in the play. I don't have like a normal DVD player. They don't work with the PlayStation or stuff. Yeah. I might have to try the Xbox One, but I still have them. Those things I will never get rid of for sure. But yeah. So
that's cool. I always appreciate it.
What's that?
I always appreciate that. Like it's still always really cool because like we've known each other for so long that sometimes I forget like when we actually officially met, and it's like when that moment was. And so it's always cool to look back at it and be like, oh, that's right. Oh my God, that's right. You had it's like,
yeah. Because I think like I was a huge, I still am a Cooter fan. We won't get on that topic too much. I don't want to switch topics, but yeah, I remember he had me go into that show and, hold up my sign that said Darren Corbin sucks. And I was like, hey, by the way, I'm going to be holding this sign. I'd be like, oh, okay. Let me guess. So-and-so sent you? Yeah. So, yeah. So, and that was a crazy time because that was, I think, let's see, you worked Mr. Incredible, I believe. You beat Mr. Incredible. The guy with the big mohawk before Sheamus, went after him.
Benny Blaze.
Yep. And then I believe it was Scarlett, I think, back in the day. And then there was a military guy. Those are the ones that really stick out from my memory from that show. And yeah, definitely a fan watching you, out there, my favorite part is when you're out there, you do a little flip and you're like, wrestling, so yeah. But speaking of Jerry Lynn and the Mall America show, I'm going to show a little picture. Hope you don't mind, but if you can just give us a little bit of how excited you were for this moment here. So there we go.
You could tell by the smug smirk on my face. 100% couldn't wait for that.
Yeah. And a lot of people, it just baffles me, like with Abby and Loopy and them, like a lot of them weren't born for that first show. And, it just, as soon as it came out, I start laughing. The fiance, Amy and Randy, take a shot. It's a thing we do here. Like I just started laughing. She's like, what? I was like, oh, I'll explain later in the car. But it was just such a nice throwback that, hopefully most people got, and then some probably had to be told. But yeah, that was definitely a proud moment. I thought that was pretty great. So
when I did see people who got it in the crowd, it made it worth it. I didn't care if everybody got it, but when I saw people who did get it, made it worth it. Also shopping for, because you'd think a puffy white shirt would be easy, but a puffy white shirt with no collar, with a pocket, with was harder to find than I thought. Took me a bit, and it was hilarious watching me shop for it. I ended up finding something close that I could do in J.C. Penney, but I'm sitting there with a photo of him, that photo that's there, going, not frilly enough. Like trying to find and see if I can find, like, first of all, I was trying to find like a no collar long sleeve shirt, and I ended up having to take the collar and tucking it, actually, is how I had to make it work. But
Gotcha.
I couldn't resist, because every time I see like an insider thing about the first Nitro, it's always like Sugar in the puffy shirt. Always like Sugar in the puffy shirt. So I'm so glad I got to do it. Perfect.
I hope for the day where, you guys are on the same card or in the same, vicinity where you could show him that, and, just the clip of you coming out at the Mall of America, because that's just iconic itself, Another picture I got for you, because if you don't know, you should know. This is why we love Darin Corbin up here so much. Darin loves to get the fans riled up, and I think that is one of my favorite photos of you, where you're just like, yeah. And there's other ones like that, but that definitely is one of my favorite ones there for sure. I mean, just that smirk, and yeah, you are a legend, sir. I cannot say that enough. So
I love that. Ended up happening so organically at Freelance. It was one of the things. It started with this guy named Jeremy, and he like, I would come out and I would just stand there, and he would just yell the most ridiculous and profane things in my ear, and I just couldn't stop it. And then everybody started joining in, and it actually became like one of Freelance's, like a lot of the people watching, like a lot of the talent would watch up in the balcony and be like, that was great. We used to love watching when you would come out just for that moment, and just being like how you would react to them, like, and it was so great. And like, it got to a point where, like, I know that they were trying to yell things that would like be funny, but then also break me, and there was just so much going on that I couldn't focus, so it never really worked. But like, I would catch something and be like, what? But the photos are always so good from that moment. I absolutely love it.
One day I hope to get to a Freelance show. I know I've been down in Illinois when you've been wrestling, but I've been at a Comic-Con. But yeah, definitely, like, when I explain first wrestling to anyone, that is something that I bring up, is that, there's a guy, Darin Corbin. He's one of my favorite wrestlers. He comes out to an FU chant, and it's just amazing. And then there's me, one of three people, going, let's go Corbin. And then everybody starts telling me to shut up because I'm the only guy cheering for you. And it brings back a memory at an MAW show where I was like the only one rooting for you. And the little girl, she was probably about 10 or 11, was yelling at me to shut up. She's like, you don't even know him. And I was like, yeah, I do. I've known the guy for, 8+ years. I got a million selfies with him, more than any friend I probably have. But like, and she's just like, whatever, he sucks. And I was just like, he's doing his job. So
love it. I love it. No, it's so fun, and I just always feel like whatever the reaction is, it's great. And I've, and again, at First Wrestling, I lived for that reaction. I wanted so badly to be where I'm at now. I wanted to be like the top, the jerk there.
And speaking of top, just so we all know, that's our WrestlePalooza champion, our sponsor here, Darin Corbin. Loopy said he cried. Abby was over the moon about it. I, as a fan, for as long as I have, that match took me on a roller coaster, sir. And I've never been taken on a ride like that in a very long time. And even Amy Randy Take a Shot was just like watching me, just like, scrapping my head. And I'm like, damn it, like screaming at the ref to make the count. And like, I got so sucked into that match that I felt a part of it. And I am honored to call you a friend, as well as I'm proud of you for that moment. I know you hear it a lot from everybody else, but like, to me, that was the highlight of that whole night. Like, I waited. I was all excited just to come over and get a picture with you because you had the belt. I instantly sent that DM, like, congratulations, because like, I was just that excited for you. So
That match is definitely one of my favorites. Like,
Mhm.
top 10, that match with Arya. Like, I feel like there's a lot that goes into when you're like, this is a match that I consider. And I mean,
Mhm.
like that, obviously winning the championship, that crowd, that location. Uh, I really thought the match was done very well
Mhm.
to do it. Like you said, a lot of people like it had a lot of ups and downs in it. It
Mhm.
was great. All things considered, definitely one of my favorite matches I've ever had. And the one compliment that I got that I really appreciated was that somebody came up to me and said that me winning that really sparks a different, like it's like an injection. It's like
Mhm.
it adds some intrigue now, because not that anything was ever bad prior to that, but you had Airwolf, who, again, like, so Canon, obviously first wrestling
Yep.
synonymous. Airwolf, where we were all like, you're going on to bigger and better things, and then sure enough, he
Yep.
AEW. Arya, same thing. So it was
Yep.
kind of like who was getting championship matches were always kind of like your next kind of step to that. Like, and but there also wasn't, it was always, even if you were the bad, like, even if you were the heel, you were still like, you still had a representation where it was like you were a figurehead for the company.
Mhm.
Whereas I think me winning turns things very much like
Oh yes.
upside down. And and a lot of people are like, I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm very intrigued to see what you do with it,
Yeah.
because even the build to it, like beating all the like indie darlings has
Yep.
been a fun ride too.
Yep. I was gonna print out pictures, but I didn't want to like, get, anybody mad at me or you. I was gonna put Warhorse back there, Darius, Davari, Cannon. I was gonna put little big slash of red, but like, I'm trying to get these guys on for interviews. I don't want them to think it's like legit that I, being disrespectful, because, trying to grow this podcast. But Darren, I appreciate you coming on. I don't want to take too much of your time. If you want to plug that Patreon one more time, I'll let you. And then anything else you want to plug, say the floor or the room, whatever you want to call it, is yours, sir.
Biggest thing, if you're looking to follow me anywhere, Twitter and Instagram, just add Darren Corbin, the easiest one there. I have a Teespring store that I normally have a lot of merchandise that you can kind of go for. But a big thing is my Patreon. We didn't even touch base really on it today, which was kind of nice. But currently, I'm out of action. I'm injured. While things are going a little bit better, I'm just not in ring ready yet. So what I've really appreciated is a lot of people have stepped up and found ways to support, and I can't thank people enough for that. My Patreon numbers have grown. I've had a lot of people like up their pledges. I think that's great. But as you know, I do genuinely enjoy the
Mhm.
interaction of that community, and building and creating content. And I like to share stuff with it, and I do the Q&As all the time, and I like to do behind the scenes and talk about stuff. And I've been documenting my journey with this, and like when I'm coming back. So a big thing is that is probably right now the best way until I get a kind of an idea when I'll be back in the ring.
Perfect. And now I am a subscriber to the Patreon as well. I was in the 8x10 tier, but I moved on to continue to support Darren, not to like, boost my own ego here. That was definitely my favorite tier because I collect everything Darren. We even had to like, figure out what 8x10 I didn't have for that month because I have so many. It's over 20. But yes, support Darren on that Patreon. And if you're at shows, hit him up. One of the most genuine people that you'll meet on the independent circuit. Very cordial. Always remembers your name, unless you're not a crazy guy like me comes up. And I'm running out of things to get signed by you, so I'm always trying to find something
We'll find
new. And
something. We'll find something.
yeah, there's always another match where I can, especially that one with Effie and the Stapler. That's one of
Oh,
my
so
favorite photos. I didn't want to put that on here and get like, taken down for gore or something, but that was that was one of my favorite shots. I thought that was hilarious. I got a few of those signed, gave one to Abby, one for myself, and then Matt, the other bearded guy that's always around the wrestling circuit.
Yep.
I gave one to him as well. So, but Darren, I can't thank you enough for coming on, taking the time. I know you sponsored us here at Friends of the Squared Circle. Thank you for being a friend of the Squared Circle. hang out in the lounge. We'll talk real briefly after this, and then I'll just close up shop here. So
Sounds good. Thanks
right.
for having me.
Thanks again, buddy. Appreciate it. All right, you heard it from the sponsor himself. We're not going to get into that. If you want merch, feel free to hit me up. I've got some hats, stickers, t-shirts we're not really doing right now because I don't want to be sitting on a lot of merch. It's wedding season. Randy, take a shot. Amy and I, yes, are getting married. So as always, people, thank you for being a friend of the Squared Circle. Continue to help us grow and show by sharing our stuff, liking our stuff. We have another segment coming up of Show Me the Collectibles soon, as well as Friends of the Squared Circle Showcase, where you can brag about meeting professional wrestlers, as well as a little bit of trivia on there as well. And this is your boy, Commander Q, out.